Welcome to the X-Files, where today we dig into the vault of cancelled Shonen Jump manga to cover one of my favourite subjects, vampires. Let's not waste any time and boot up this file. Full name, Our Blood Oath or Bokura no Ketsume. Created by Kazu Kakazu. Start date September 14th, 2020. End date January 25th, 2021. Total chapters 18, split into 2 volumes. For the English translation we can credit Stefan Paul, lettering is by Sneer Aron, with design and editing by Cam Lee and Alexis Kirsch. Before we dig into Our Blood Oath in full, let's learn a bit more about its author Kazu Kakazu, who we know a little bit about. They would become publicly active in the late 2010s, acting as an assistant on Blue Flag, and then would become the artist on the Jump Giga short series Yashiro in 2018, alongside writer Taro Watanabe, that ran for 3 chapters. It looks to be similar to Our Blood Oath, with it being set in modern day, with various monsters and organizations doing battle. The main character is also undead and has some blood-based looking abilities too, firmly giving Kakazu a bit of a niche. After this, Red Pledge would debut in issue 50 of Shonen Jump in 2019, being quite well received as it would see serialization less than a year later, being the manga we're here to talk about today. I'm unsure of the differences overall between one-shot and series, as to my knowledge the one-shot has not been translated, but the core characters, art style and focus on vampires is all there. So, with that brief history on Kakazu out of the way, let's dive into the series proper. We begin with the introduction of our 2 brothers, Ko and Shin Hizuki, not related by blood but bound by it, the elder Shin having a blood oath with his younger brother Ko, whom is a vampire. Vampires in this world aren't just bound to human forms either, as vampiric beasts exists like this sheep in chapter 1, which chases this boy named Chino. The 2 brothers then end up saving him. Initially, the plot takes an episodic approach, seeing the brothers help out various humans and vampires with their issues, injecting little slice-of-life beats between the 2 to help us become endeared to them. Horror elements are attempted as well, with some being pretty evocative, like Shino's situation at the beginning. His family feel different, changed, they no longer speak to him, and give him vacant glares, forcing him to live under the staircase where he eats out of a dog bowl. They too are vampires, but bad ones who have possessed or look like his family for the time being, belonging to a single large Cerberus-looking beast vampire which the brothers have to defeat. There's dialogue here about adopted parents and the idea of blood tying families together initially. Shino's situation is shown alongside Ko and Shin's, with the latter being adopted himself. The 2 brothers live together in a large mansion a long ways from the nearest populated area. Their parents were killed long ago and Shin is contracted to his younger brother but firmly acts as his guardian. Those are the basics for the 2 and we don't really get much beyond this, so I'm sorry if all of the elements I've just mentioned sound quite disparate. As for how the 2 interact, Ko is very clingy and bratty and possessive of his brother. Shin meanwhile is fairly calm, collected and aloof at times, though snaps when he needs to, also having a caring and borderline obsessive connection to his brother. The ingredients for an interesting pair are here, and it's something I'll dig into a bit more later, though for the majority of the story they don't really grow, nor do they engage with the core idea or conflict of the series, which is how humans and vampires might coexist. To explore this idea first, let's try to define what the vampires are like in Our Blood Oath. Vampires come in a myriad of different shapes and sizes throughout media, though will tend to have many things in common beyond the usual surface level traits like needing to suck blood or having aversions to various things like sunlight or silver. Here we have the core dilemma of them needing human vitae. They need blood to survive, though this can actually be circumvented by animal blood. They also aren't weak to the sun or much else from what the series presents, other than the mention of them being weak to fire. Another facet about them is how they age, with Our Blood Oath opting for a gradual, slow aging process, so vampire children like Ko can grow up to a certain point before they presumably stop growing, though the specifics of this are never revealed. Vampires thusly can also have children, I would assume based on Ko's existence, since it makes a big deal about Shin not being blood related to Ko and his parents. Now, what does Our Blood Oath explore with these traits? Predominantly the divide between human and vampire, which it mirrors to blood related and adopted siblings. I feel a fitting thing to interlink, as vampire media often has strong connotations to found families, being adopted into new families, and the whole blood aspect is there too. There are the bones of something here, though it becomes quickly apparent Abladoth just doesn't engage with them nor build upon them in any interesting ways, preferring to take the route of a fairly generic battle shonen instead. A core reason why I don't think it executes on its ideas is the antagonistic vampires, who are laughably evil and not in a fun Dio-like way. They wax poetic about how disgusting and dreadful humanity is, when multiple times do they just kidnap children in an attempt to kidnap another vampire child in Ko. And they have no qualms about doing things like holding hostages or letting other vampire children cannibalize their human friends. An oddly dark moment in the series which, if it leaned into more, could have been compelling. The morals and motivations of these vampires just aren't concrete or believable enough, and one justification brought up is a backstory involving an ages-old vampire getting their town burnt down centuries ago. Without any other build-up, it only makes the reasoning behind how some vampires act all the more vapid, especially when numerous vampires seem to have adjusted to normal life pretty comfortably. They don't fear the sun. Because of the infrastructure and community they've built, they don't need to fear not having any blood. There's a gulf between cartoonishly evil and normal person. There's no real nuance here. Perhaps the silliest this gets is when Ko is visited by Haiga at school, a vampire from a rival clan who ends up scaring his little cat into the road nearby and chases after it. This triggers a series of events where the cat almost gets run over by a truck. The truck driver rightfully chastises everyone about this after Haiga gets hit. Haiga looks like he's then about to kill the bus driver, so the bus driver attempts to drive into him, only for Haiga to disintegrate the entire truck but not harming the driver. Haiga asserts that humans are really cruel and selfish creatures, that he tried to run him over twice. The blame is placed on this driver solely, who, yes, could have handled the situation better, but also people tend not to run into the road suddenly. Granted, this is by a school, so if he was driving too fast, he was doing something bad, but that does question the logistics of this situation. It's very contrived. A truck just so happened to drive super fast past this school at this exact same time right after school had ended. All of this is done just to set up this very specific chain of events. What is also contrived here are Haiga's reasonings for asserting his beliefs. He was the one to initially scare the cat and then chased it into the road, so where does he fall in this chain of blame? This is just one instance of Abladoth's way of storytelling where its scenarios do not feel natural. They build to create these shaky, fake feeling conflicts. They lack nuance, perhaps so that the brothers can be the clear good force in these situations, but in doing so, this story ends up taking no advantage of vampires as a subject and is frankly poorly written. This event with Haiga then leads Abladoth into its final act, a character introduction boss rush for the last 8 chapters. Haiga takes this random human as a hostage, this being the 3rd or 4th time a vampire has done this to initiate a conflict with the brothers. A fight ensues, the brothers beat him, and then his boss Kaine appears with a death fake out for Haiga. A fight ensues again, there's some edgy queer baiting blood drinking NTR done, and the brothers beat him, only for a gaggle of new characters to appear, restrainers, vampire hunters who give Haiga and Kaine another fake out death. A fight then seems to begin, only for another character to then appear, this time the brother's uncle, Rangetsu, who manages to scare the vampire hunters away. We then return to the mansion for some little bits of lore, Rangetsu being from a different clan to Ko but his mother's brother, and the one who trained Shin up. He does some weird magic house shenanigans to imprison Kaine, which causes him to gradually go insane. The brothers bring back one of the girls he kidnapped, who offers him some kind of forgiveness, and he says, "Sorry, but yeah, I'm sorry I kidnapped you and made you eat your best friend," does not absolve him of anything. It's a real slapdash way of trying to force this coexistence narrative or forgiveness narrative, which it tries to do by slapping character upon character on top of the ending. It then finally ends with Shin and Ko alone in town, and the big brother remarks that he was glad he could be born to be by Ko's side and to support him. They hug, and the manga ends. Now that we've run through the story, there's a few topics I want to touch on. Since it's relevant to the ending, let's look at this forgiveness angle which entangles itself with the coexistence narrative the series wants to push. It's weak. I like the sentiment that we should all get along, forgiveness is important too, but not when it's hardly built up and not at all earned, and putting yourself into the magic torture chamber so you can relive past traumas to only say I'm sorry does not cut it. This act at the end of Our Blood Oath is very self-serving. I don't believe an understanding is really reached. There was no attempt by the perpetrator of these deeds to make amends. They were forced, much like the entire narrative feels forced too. I would rather this angle not be tackled at all since it was rushed due to the series being cancelled. It ends up echoing out as a really hollow message. Tied to this is the coexistence narrative. Can humans and vampires truly live together? Well, the only thing that's really explored here or really said is Ko and Shin multiple times, showing that, well, those two are friends and brothers, so vampires seem to be doing good, or it is possible. There is no in-depth exploration of this idea at all. There is also the whole thing of many vampires just living their lives fairly normally, and this causes a problem to arise in how Our Blood Oath sets up its vampires, or how it hasn't really set them up at all. For this kind of narrative to work, I feel you need to establish vampires firmly as an other. There needs to be fundamental differences on a grand level or a personal one for this type of narrative to work. But when your vampires are hardly any different from humans, you end up with something pretty boring or have villains which are just caricature sociopaths. The vampires here are boring. They're no different from any other battle series where people just have random powers. This is probably more of a big deal for me specifically, since I really love vampire media. The breadth of different topics you can explore through vampires is immense. They are among, if not the most humanistic of monsters that have permeated human culture, having numerous great stories outside of Japan through classic novels to recent lauded films, and within the country and in manga, there's a lot of great vampire works too. It's frustrating and disappointing that not much is done with them as a concept here. There is one subject though I do want to tackle that involves vampires which the series doesn't address on the surface, and it's to do with the brothers, how they interact and who their relationship might appeal to. This is probably one of the only interesting topics I can extract from Our Blood Oath, though it doesn't really involve the series itself. Going back a bit, I mentioned there being vampire media that permeated human culture and Japanese culture. There are popular vampire works and popular vampire manga in Japan. 1972's The Pokland by Moto Hagio comes to mind, a work that would go on to greatly influence not only future vampire manga, but notably boys love manga overall. Vampires, boys love, and even the idea of shota characters are interlinked tightly, partially due to The Pokland and its influence. Whether Our Blood Oath was knowingly created with this context in mind is debatable, but it fits together all too well for me to not bring up. The Pokland is an anthology story of sorts, seeing various vampires interact with the world, trapped in an ageless malaise. These are boys who cannot grow up, they feel divorced from society being vampires, they can never stay around other people for too long on account of their age or lack of aging, and due to their physical bodies, adult vampires are wary of them too. There is this fated and tragic feeling of them being alone forever, only finding comfort in each other. It utilizes the concept of the vampire to explore feelings of otherness, stunted growth, and loneliness in an emotive way. In contrast, Our Blood Oath doesn't fully toy around with this idea at all, remarking Ko and vampires still age. What if Ko was the older brother here? What if some more emotional angle was touched on in regards to age throughout Our Blood Oath? With just a little bit of thought, you can create a conceptually rich hook for a vampire story, but nothing was attempted here, and this is only me talking about the age aspect of the series, when you can extract so many different things from vampire media. There's so many different avenues you can go down to find something interesting to talk about, but nothing was attempted. You then have the boys love aspect I mentioned, something which the Pokland and Hagio would help pioneer. This would also eventually become firmly interlinked with Shonen Jump through various popular series, attracting specific fans. Notably, Captain Tsubasa would garner an influx of female readers, leading to a boom in doujin comics featuring some of the boys. Over time, many Jump series have garnered a similar kind of popularity, with series like Saint Seiya also being notable, and for more recent examples, Kuroko no Basket and Haikyuu for sports series exist, and the boys of series like My Hero Academia or even Kagurabachi are quite popular too in this context. What I want to highlight here with this is Jump's audience is diverse. It's far from just young boys reading. The demographic moniker it has means very little at times. While Our Blood Oath could and most likely appeal to the crowd who just wanted a new supernatural battle manga, the non-blood related bratty little brother Ko and the protective older brother Shin definitely appeal to a similar grouping of people interested in boys' love, I feel, or at least people who might just like seeing cute boys doing cute things. With this discussion on vampires and Our Blood Oath's potential audience in mind, why did it get cut, especially when the initial one-shot seemed promising? Well, I imagine a part of why it was popular initially was a small group of people wanting to see more of the brothers interacting, more cute boys. A small, fanatical audience isn't always enough though, and clearly the series has issues which I don't think endeared it to Jump's audience at large. At its core, I don't think Our Blood Oath is consistent in the slightest. Its world and establishment of vampires feels very flat. Its contrived way of storytelling is also boring. You can only have so many kidnappings or hostages in any given series, never mind in such a short span of time. Numerous times I also found things confusing, which is partially due to the artwork. Some characters tend to look quite samey or alter their behavior and speech at points. Izuki is a big example of this, with the jump from chapter 4 to 5 being really confusing. You have attitude changes, vampires using possessing abilities to be different characters. Also, it's kind of fucked up that the brother's surname is Hizuki, and then you have a character called Izuki. Maybe the kanji and kana are a bit different, but this does contribute to confusion for English readers. These are all small nitpicks, but I found they consistently compounded to make parts of Our Blood Oath a chore to read, and even if the average reader didn't pick up on all of this, I feel like some smaller grievances would at least filter through. Looking at the magazine at the time, battle series were, as ever, in strong supply, with Phantom Seer, its batchmate, juggling horror and fights too, lasting a bit longer but ultimately facing cancellation all the same, which I think shows that Jump didn't really want or need a series like this at the time. Our Blood Oath's attempt to be slightly more slice of life focused might have also struggled against things like Magu-chan, Mission Yuzakura Family, or Ayakashi Triangle 2. It wasn't all that unique amongst the lineup at the time. Those are all just my thoughts though, and as usual I try to involve others in these videos through read-alongs on the X-File Office's Discord. Perhaps some saw things differently or might present ideas I haven't thought of, so let's take a look at what they've sent in. One of the pervading sentiments I saw this time was people pushing back against the idea that Our Blood Oath is the very worst of Jump, like Genetics Review. They do mention the series struggling with finding a balance of what it wanted to do. The cute slice of life brother antics and the horror did clash for them, and they said it being more consistent would have helped the series overall. Similarly, Demon Summoning Enthusiast fights against the moniker of Our Blood Oath being called one of the magazine's worst series ever, finding its terribleness over-exaggerated, but not calling it good by any means, though they do highlight numerous issues with the series and slight it as quite bland in its approach to story and in regards to most of its cast. Joni feels as though Our Blood Oath demonstrated a lack of polish and ability from Kakazu, with it having an air of the author not being ready for serialization yet. They bring it up feeling half-baked, with many of its ideas not being properly extrapolated on or making a whole lot of sense. Alongside this, Joni also brings up how frequently it would bring up concepts leading to it feeling frantic and untethered. There's nothing to grasp onto, which they find a shame as some of its ideas that it did possess are interesting and show clear potential. Fenrir Black highlights various inconsistent or poorly written elements throughout the story, remarking on it often shoving in plot elements without explaining them, like the vampiric beast in chapter 1 attacking Shino, or the child who stumbles on into the mansion in chapter 2. Things that could have happened with the right build-up, but with the overabundance of events like this without build-up, it leads to it feeling contrived. This extends to the ending too, which Fenrir Black comments on, it doing the same thing, introducing characters and ideas left to right, with the final sentiment of the review being that it's ideas without purpose or necessity. A scathing remark, but one I can't help but agree with. Jesus Flash though mentions the series being kind of cute, showing some positives, and they enjoyed the art, but expressed quite a bit of confusion towards the vampires of Our Blood Oath, lavishing it with various questions which the series never truly fleshes out. Here we see a lot of confusion in this review, but also a lack of interest too, since it never truly set up its world or ideas properly. Lumi found Our Blood Oath very rushed and weirdly paced, especially the parts where the werewolf boy took his top off in front of Bella's dad. It all being a vision in the end with bad special effects and a creepy baby was the cherry on top of it not being a very good experience.
Jacob, put your clothes on.
Hang on, wait, that's not a what? That's not Our Blood. I jest, but in all honesty, I did watch the Twilight movies in the Discord with people while this read-along was ongoing, and I feel like parts of those movies are genuinely more engaging than Our Blood Oath, or so goofily silly they can still be fun. The series not engaging with its core premise nor being absurdly campy is such a shame, since much vampire media falls under one, the other, or both. A dullness instead marks many of people's reading experience here, which just sucks. On a brighter note, Jay Vasso seemed to genuinely enjoy parts of Our Blood Oath, liking its approach to combat, some character dynamics, and its designs, though does state that there wasn't enough to keep it afloat. Events moved too quickly, it didn't build up anything enough, leading to it lacking in impact, something they hope changes with any future series by Kakazu, which they would gladly like to see again. Many reiterate wanting to see Kakazu return to, like Chima, who found the series wasn't as bad on a reread, while still suffering in some areas like with its weak characterization. They enjoyed some of the earlier establishing chapters and thought it didn't handle its discussion on marginalization through vampires too poorly or in a way that felt too forced. Over the course of many reviews, including Kinky's, we do see little specks of things which intrigued people, like the portion where the young vampire girl eats her friend. A few people brought this up in their reviews. Some ideas do get people's gears spinning in their heads, but Our Blood Oath never manages to hit the follow-up to these events quite right, leading to the general view of it being pretty lackluster. I do think from rereading and hearing what people have had to say that on a weekly read, this hit way worse. The episodic format and some of its more confusing chapter transitions may have made it seem as though it flowed a lot worse than it does on a volume-to-volume basis. Still, it does remain one of the most poorly handled and boring series we've covered on the X-Files. After Our Blood Oath, Kakazu would resurface in Jump Giga's autumn issue of 2022, with the one-shot Sudama no Kusa getting a color page as well. Seemingly heavily inspired by Mushishi, this follows a wandering doctor type helping out children who have been infected by strange plant/bug entities. It still feels very much akin to Our Blood Oath in both its art, how powers are used and effects are drawn, but the atmosphere is much improved. Sadly, this is all we have from Kakazu, and they've been silent since, though it isn't uncommon for mangaka to be working on things in the background, so perhaps one day we'll see them again in Jump or elsewhere. I might have been more critical than usual in this video, but genuinely it does come from a place of love for vampires and the stories they inhabit. There's great potential and a high ceiling for their stories to be resonant to me. Before we go though, I do want to highlight the afterword by Kakazu that brings up thanks to their assistant, but also their feelings regarding the process in making Our Blood Oath. Here's a quote from them. "There was never any thought in my mind at any point in my life that I'd get the chance to draw this for Weekly Shonen Jump. Being in Shonen Jump is a big deal, whether your series lasts long or not. Of course, getting a hit is desired. It means getting a stable income, getting to tell your story to the masses, but the magazine itself is important. It's the biggest manga magazine ever. Chances are, if you grew up in Japan, you grew up with Jump, or at least some notion of it. Being a mangaka and getting to tell your story within its pages is special, and I'm glad Kakazu could still take that out of this experience despite how rocky it might have been. The gratitude they express and the love of drawing they mention is palpable. It's nice and important to remember that at the core of these cancelled works, even if you don't like them, there are people just doing their best to create and convey their stories. And that marks the end of this X-File on Our Blood Oath, often remarked as one of the worst modern Jump series, but what are your thoughts? Do you remember reading this weekly? Is it something you remember fondly or not so fondly? Are vampires something you'd like to see crop up again in Jump sometime in the future? Feel free to mention your thoughts down below in the comments, and if you want more videos like this on cancelled Shonen Jump manga, please subscribe, like the video, and check out the channel as I have a playlist full of similar videos. If the vampire aspect of this series is something you'd like to see more of too, I have a video on different older vampire manga which was a ton of fun to make. I'll leave a link to that in the description. There's also a link there to my Patreon if you'd like to support future videos like this being made. A huge thanks goes out to everyone who's supported me thus far, and if you'd like to be thanked alongside them, you can for as little as $1 a month. There's some cool bonus stuff there like exclusive videos, updates, and polls to decide what future manga I cover next in this format. You can even suggest some manga there too. And nothing is tier gated besides patrons at the $3 tier or higher getting their own little doodle drawn by me to represent them in the credits of videos like all of these cool people. Thank you, Trinity, Jade, Kazu, Soroquel Zero, Holly the Apothecary, Mayu, It's Fako, Yellowtail, Lay Sloggett, Chris P. Bacon, Joe Henshin, Full Metal, Unquestionable, Yozakura Psycho, Wurzel, Violent, Cactus, Joni, City Name E, Vino Burrito, Caffeine Dad, Cryonaut, Crash, 41IZ, Hong, Jamie Reynolds, Manu, Poke Emblem, James Miller, Joba Monkey, Just a Virus, Star Sphinx, PK Broly, Fenrir Black, Elijah Espinoza, Neo Humanoid, Mark Nielsen, Electra Pirate, Jay Vasso, Three Frogs in a Trenchcoat, Sir Flash, Gay Shark, Slimy Okra, Kidista, Wavy Sky, TG Talks Manga, John Jerry 722, Andrew, Zenomat, Missile, Tara Elizabeth, Stratomega 13, Dennis Tambik, Jubei, Lise, Frogdude, Back on Earth, Yustin Maikage, Papa Eon, Hilltop, Vako Draws, Otaku Gamer X, Deadpan, Shy Monkeys, Jonathan Dragonet, John Sanford, Color, Jaime, Strawberry Prosione, Vaz, Palette, Ruina, Juice, Chromie Knox, Eric Gorski, Mr. Shira, Grizz Exploder, Dextora, Ennio Showo, Cheese, Emmy, Benjamin, Tenmaku Lover, Taifumi Studios, Ignate, Iliades, Gyros, VHS Enthusiast, Kananojo, and King Snacks. Thank you all so much for being patrons, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Remember to be kind and take care.